AfriForum has criticized a bid by the Nelson Mandela Foundation to have the displaying of the old South African flag declared hate speech. The lobby group says it might take action against the foundation's court application on this matter. It argues that banning the flag will be a violation of freedom of speech. We're joined by AfriForum Deputy CEO Ernst Roets, who's in our Pretoria studios for us this morning. Ernst, a very good morning to you, and thanks for your time. What is your basis? What is your argument when you say that this flag, the use of the flag, the old South African flag, should not be banned?
Well, thank you very much. I think the first thing that's important to say is that AfriForum does not use the old South African flag, and I personally do not have any particular loyalty necessarily towards that flag. The argument behind this is not about whether you support the flag or whether you don't support the flag. The argument behind this is whether we are respecting freedom, and particularly respecting freedom of speech in South Africa. And the notion that you can fight someone's ideas by banning their symbols or their flags has never worked. Ideas don't go down with their flags. So if there's a problem with ideas that people are circulating in this country that you disagree with, you should engage with those people, and you should debate with those people, and you should prove to them why they are wrong. Banning a symbol would not solve anything. Well,
Ernst, you know, the argument out there is that this flag, at the base of it all, actually symbolizes apartheid, which was a painful, horrific time for the country. Yes. And the message, and it has been deemed a crime against humanity. So when you say the freedom of speech or the freedom of expression, it's to express that you're okay with that.
Well, I think the point here is that if we apply this consistently, the argument that's being used as to why this flag should be banned, then I think there's an even stronger argument that the South African Communist Party's flag should be banned. And the reason why I'm saying this is, I know the Nelson Mandela Foundation is trying to compare the old South African, or trying to compare apartheid with Nazi Germany, which Nelson Mandela's friend, ironically, Alan Paton, said is a prostitution of language if you try to say that apartheid was the same as Nazi Germany. But for every one person killed by Nazis, about 15 people were killed by communists. About 100 million people have been killed by communists. An entire country was starved by communists. Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong murdered people in the street. So we can make that same argument, and if we go down this path of saying if something offends you, we're going to ban it, then there's going to be a lot of flags that people didn't suspect that would be banned. And the same argument could even be made about the ANC's flag. We know about the political violence during the 1980s. I personally know people whose family members have been killed or murdered by ANC members during the 1980s. They might then go and say, well, I'm extremely offended every time I see the ANC's flag, so the flag has to be declared hate speech and banned. I don't think that this is a path that we want to, that it wouldn't be good for the country if we go down this path. I think we should engage in the battle of ideas. All
right, Ernst, I mean, I beg to differ with you when it comes to the SACP flag and the ideology of communism. I mean, the ideology of communism has not been deemed a crime against humanity, but some may have used it for their own gain. Some may have used it in a way it's not supposed to be used. You can't have the same argument for apartheid and what this flag actually represents.
No, you can't. The argument against communism is much worse. I'm not defending apartheid. I'm just saying if you compare what happened during apartheid to what happened under the Soviet Union, to what happened under Mao Zedong, to what happened under Pol Pot, to what happened under Fidel Castro, we can go down the list. I'm saying if we start comparing numbers in terms of people who have been killed, in terms of the way these people have been killed, in terms of the ideas that's been portrayed, in terms of the way in which freedom has been curtailed, there's no comparison between apartheid and communism. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to defend apartheid. I'm saying the facts are there. Mao Zedong tortured people in the street while he stood next to them making political speeches. That's what happened in the name of communism. So there's really no comparison. I mean, we can criticize, and we should criticize apartheid, and we can discuss that for an entire day. But to say that you cannot compare apartheid to communism because apartheid is worse, I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Well, Ernst, I think, you know, we'd have to go back in history and see who used what for which means, and that's going to take us all morning. But let's talk about what you're actually doing now at the moment. What we're doing at the moment, what exactly do you want What do you want to be allowed, or what are you actually asking when you're saying don't ban this? Because I spoke to Salah Hatang yesterday. He says we're not asking for it to be criminalized. He says it belongs in a museum with the right story to be told about what this flag represented, the right story, the correct story, and what it stood for. It belongs in documentaries and cathartic creative works where it tells the truth about the context of this flag and it places it in context. What do you want to be able to do with this flag for those who want to display it wherever they want?
Well, firstly, we don't want to do anything with the flag, but in terms of the principle that I think we should apply here is we should look at what does the law say about hate speech, firstly, and what is, regardless of what the law says, what is the appropriate way that hate speech should be applied. And the appropriate way globally and in South Africa, according to our own law, is to determine if something is hate speech. It's not simply to ask, does it offend people? Because I can say stuff to you now that would offend you, you can say stuff to me now that would offend me. The question is, does it propagate hatred in the first place, and does it contain a call to action? And simply displaying a flag is not a call to action. Despite my very strong opinions about communism, for example, if someone displays a communist flag, there's no call to action. If someone displays a communist flag and says we need to murder capitalists, then it's hate speech. The same way, if someone displays the old South African flag and makes a comment about some type of call to action, let's say against black people, then it's hate speech. So the moment when there's a call to action that's connected to hatred, then it should be declared hate speech. But simply displaying a symbol isn't hate speech according to the global view of what hate speech is. Neither is it hate speech in terms of our own constitution and in terms of the Equality Act.
Well, Ernst, you know, the Nelson Mandela Foundation says that they'd sort of reports from some of your members that the foundation met with some of your members, and it doesn't seem that they fully do understand or even comprehend that apartheid was actually a crime against humanity. That in itself is very worrying. So you say you understand and you personally have nothing. Can you say the same for the rest of the people that you might be representing?
Well, there's actually a very substantial group of people in South Africa who believe that apartheid wasn't a crime against humanity. There was a poll done by the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. I can't remember the exact number. I think it was something like 30% of people in South Africa, around there, that said that they don't think apartheid was a crime against humanity. Yes, apartheid is a crime against humanity because it was declared a crime against humanity, but we also need to go back and look at that history. And I'm not saying this to defend apartheid, because we can criticize apartheid, as I said, for an entire day. But what I'm saying is there was a lot of controversy surrounding the decision that was taken. Remember, it wasn't a court that decided that apartheid was a crime against humanity. It was a committee that voted, and the committee was overwhelmingly consisted of members in African countries and Asian countries, and it was, or communist aligned countries, let me rather say that, and it was during the heat of the Cold War. So there was a lot of controversy and political issues regarding that decision. In saying that, I'm not defending apartheid. I'm just saying that it's not that simple to simply say apartheid is worse than communism because apartheid is a crime against humanity and communism is not, because communist-aligned countries dominated that particular platform that voted that apartheid was a crime against humanity and that wouldn't vote that communism is a crime against humanity. So it's not that simple to simply say it has been declared a crime against humanity, end of the story.
Well, Ernst, I mean, and I know what you're saying, and you continue to tell me that you are not defending it, you are not defending apartheid, but it actually sounds to me like when you say a group of people got together and they decided it's a crime against humanity, are you saying you don't necessarily think, although it was a bad thing, it's not a crime against humanity?
I think there's a double standard. I think, as I said, we can talk about the murder of Steve Biko and the comments made by Jimmy Kruger at that time. We can talk about a lot of things and how evil it was and how horrible it was. I'm saying that there's an extreme double standard. If people try to argue that what happened during apartheid is worse than what happened during Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward, or is equal to Nazi Germany, or is equal to what happened under Joseph Stalin, that is simply dishonest. That's brutally dishonest. And so I think there is a double standard, and perhaps we should go back and determine what are the criteria for something to be declared a crime against humanity, and then we can go back and apply that consistently. And if we can agree on what the criteria is, perhaps apartheid is, but then there are various other systems that should also be a crime against humanity. But I think our concern is the fact that there's a double standard, that we should criticize apartheid, but that apartheid is being pulled out of this whole issue to an extent that it's made something where it's compared to Nazi Germany. In Nazi Germany, they took 6 million people, they threw them in concentration camps with gas chambers, they gassed people to death, they had mass murder campaigns. And to say that apartheid was similar to what happened in Nazi Germany is an insult to 6 million Jews and their families and their loved ones. And again, I'm not saying this because I'm defending apartheid, I'm just saying that we must be balanced and we must be consistent in the way in which we evaluate.
Well, Ernst, I also think that, you know, while we want to compare and we want to look at it, and yes, you are looking at how this compares and in context of the rest of the world, we have to bring it back home. We have to look at what apartheid means for South Africans, and yes, we do sympathize with the rest of the world. What does it mean to South Africans, and how many people have died in the name of communism in South Africa as opposed to those who died in the name of apartheid?
I can answer that question for you. 21,000 people died as a result of political violence in South Africa, of which more than 90% died during the conflict between the ANC and Inkatha, during the ANC's People War. I think 1 to 3%, it's about 2 or 3% of people who died during apartheid were actually killed by the South African government. So again, in South Africa, the majority of people who died during apartheid were killed as a result of communism, not as a result of apartheid. It was during the ANC's People's War, in which they had a rival battle with Inkatha and Azapu and the Black Consciousness Movement and so forth. About 18 to 20,000 people died during that conflict, where people were necklaced and so forth. And so what's happening now, again, this is the double standard and the unbalanced and the incorrect perception of history, is we hear 20,000 people died in political violence during apartheid, and then the conclusion is the South African government murdered 20,000 people. No, they didn't. They killed they murdered a few hundred people, or a few hundred people were killed by the South African government during this violence. So we could draw that comparison as well. Well,
Ernst, you have said that you do disagree, or you agree that if a flag like this is used with a call to action, then that becomes a problem. When this flag was used during Black Monday protests last year, when people were angry, was that symbolism of them using that flag in that protest not suggesting a call to action? What was the reason for the presence of that flag in a protest like that?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you would recall that ENCA itself apologized for stating that this flag was used during Black Monday, saying that the pictures about this flag that was distributed was fake news. So that's the latest I could see from ENCA about the flag being displayed during Black Monday, was an apology for saying that it was displayed. So that's the first thing. But the second thing, if it was displayed, we must remember there were about 20,000 people participating in these protests. And allegedly one person somewhere stood displaying a flag, and if that's true, then maybe that's true, but I don't think that should necessarily be interpreted as a call to action. If that's the case, again, the ANC's flag should also be declared hate speech. Why? Because I've seen horrible things being stated by ANC members at ANC gatherings. The other day there was an ANC gathering where they literally hanged a white doll, making racist comments about killing white people. So then we can say, well, there was one ANC member at one gathering making one statement, therefore the ANC's flag must be banned. And I don't think that's, despite my strong opinions about the ANC, I don't think that that would be the appropriate way to approach this.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you very much, and very interesting, always up for debate, the subject. AfriForum Deputy CEO Ernst Roets in our Pretoria studios for us.